What's up, everybody? Welcome back, Self-Taught Garage, where today we got another little project for you. But anyway, today we got a new project for you. So, about a year, 2 years ago now, I bought a Sears or a David Bradley garden tractor, or they're known as Sears, so they're the same thing. Just David Bradley's older than Sears came in afterwards. So anyways, got a little garden tractor. Bought it. If I remember right, I paid $100 for it and a couple other things. So, all in all, I paid about $50 for it. So I've took it completely apart since then, put a new engine on it, painted all of it, restored it to the best of my ability. And over time, I've gathered new attachments for it, new things for it, just here, there, and everywhere. And currently, there's a snow plow on it, which I actually went to just south of Chicago. It's about 20 miles out of Chicago is where I picked it up. But what I'm trying to do, this thing has, I guess, a limited slip, I guess you could call it. That's what it's supposed to be, is a limited slip style rear end. So eventually you can get it to catch posi, but it doesn't, you know what I'm saying, limited slip, it ain't great. So the same thing as a car, we're going to go in and we're going to weld the rear end in this so it can be posi tracked, because the plow I have for it, this thing will pull it, but I've put a much larger engine on it than it used to have. So instead of bogging down or not wanting to pull it, it ends up spinning the tires. So we're going to posi track it. Yeah, that's the goal for this video, pretty much, is get this thing posi tracked. But first things first, we got to get the plow off, and we need to fix a couple other little issues that have been going on since I've done the restoration. I've just kind of put off. The grill does fit, but the grill cannot go on if the plow's on. That's another reason we're taking the plow off. And I actually had to make the mount for the plow, because when I got it, the plow was for a different style. It was the next size up, because this one is technically a Sears Roper, or a David Bradley Roper. R-O-P-E-R, if I'm saying it wrong, my bad. But the Roper is the smaller of the models. Then there's the, I guess it's a K10, C10, something like that, because it's the same name as a Chevy truck, but it is the bigger version, and that's what most of the attachments are made for. But I've put a 320cc engine on this, so it has the same size engine as its big brother. It has the same frame as its big brother, but it doesn't have the same rear end as its big brother, because its big brother, you can lock it into low range, which this also has the high and low range, but the low range will not posi track the rear end. So that's our biggest dilemma. We just can't lock up the rear end. So we're just going to weld it, and we're going to make it lock up, and then we can do any and everything we want to do with it. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to set you all up, probably put you into a little bit of time lapse here. So I figured you might be interested in watching how this goes down. I'm not going to do a big explanation video or nothing on this. Maybe once I have it open, I'll show y'all where you need to weld it to posi track it, stuff like that. But all in all, I'm just going to kind of set you up, and I'm going to go through this. And there you have it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this plow off, get this thing turned around, and get the rear end pulled out of it. And then I'll show you all how to open up the rear end housing, and from there we'll get to welding. All right, as you can see, we got the plow off. Came off fairly quickly, actually, but you can see I had a weld here on it to hold it in. That bolt's coming out of the front end again. So I mean, there's just a few little things that we need to clean up. But before we even worry about any of that, I'm going to go ahead and get this put back in, obviously, but we're not going to worry about any of that until we get the rear end out of this and posi tracked. So I'm going to get this thing turned around. We're going to get started on that before we mess with anything cosmetic. So we'll get y'all set back up, we'll get it flipped around, and we'll get going on it again. Alright, so I stopped filming for a while, but as you can see, got the rear end out and separated. Had a couple issues, but you can tell that that thing had been full of water and oil. That's why it's milky like that. But the area that has to be welded on this is right here. The downside is we cannot get the other hub off. So, not 100% sure how we're going to be able to get that other side welded in there. But something we're going to have to figure out. I'm starting to guess I'm going to have to disassemble all of this in order to get to that other hub. But I guess we will see. That other hub, what happened, there's those screws. There's two of them. And on that hub, one of them broke. I've drilled it out. I've taken extractors to it. I've tried torching it out. And I just cannot get that bolt out because that is cast. So it's destroying my drill bits. So I can't drill the bolt completely out. Because that's what I was going to do, is just drill it out and retap the hole. Put a different bolt in it. Can't do it. So, yeah. I'm kind of stuck with this side. So I'm really hoping that this, the only set of spider gears is right here. Which I believe so. Because as you can see, alright, it's rotating now, right? But that is the drive gear for the other axle. This is the drive gear for this axle. So, what my plan is, I'm just going to weld it. I'm going to weld it all. Because this axle engages when that axle gets slid down. So when this slides down, it starts driving this tire. When it slides up, it drives this tire. So what we're going to do is somehow try to get these positioned right in the center of both drive gears and weld it. So that way it has no choice but to constantly rotate the axles. So I'm going to get off here. I'm going to start figuring out how I'm going to get this done, and then I'll bring y'all back, tell you how I'm going to do it. All right, so I've got this thing all covered up with a bunch of wet napkins. I was just thinking about it. This welder that I have is a flux core, so I should probably use the stick on this, but my stick welder is a smaller inverter. So I'm afraid I won't be able to get it to arc off on this. So we're going to use the MIG, and we're just going to give it a real low feed rate, and we're going to try to burn it in the best we can. I've done all that to help control the flux, because there's definitely going to be flux. Not flux, but slag, because this thing splatters a lot. So with that in mind, and then the fact these gears have been in oil forever, they're going to have oil in them too, so that's probably going to make it splatter even worse. I have cleaned it as well as I can with brake clean, but all things to considered, it's still going to make a mess. So I've done that to be able to control it the best I can. And what we are going to do is, I'm going to weld up here, down here, then we're going to rotate it, do the same thing to the other side. Then we're going to come in on the side here and weld those two gears right there as well. So it should have, each axle will have 4 beads actually holding it in place. So that'll, well, it'll be 6 to 8 welds in total, all depending. But all in all, it should hold it solid. And if for some reason I don't like the way they turn out, I will come back and I'll go over it again with the stick welder. But for now, I'm going to set y'all up, and I'm going to get to burning this thing in. Alright, so I got done doing the welding, and as you've seen, I was taking that magnet around and getting some of this slag. So what I'm doing now, because there's still quite a bit of slag left, so I'm taking this can of brake clean, and I'm just going to push the remaining slag into the oil. And then when I pour this case out the rest of the way, I'm going to obviously rinse it out again with brake clean, and we should get the remaining slag out that way. And before I reassemble this, I have a small round magnet over there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole into this case, and I'm going to put that magnet in the bottom of the case. So that way, if there's any more slag floating around in this oil, it should all, over time, get pushed to the magnet or circulate past the magnet at some point. And that way, open the case, pull the magnet out, clean it, put it back in. So that's the long-term fix for it. But for now, we're just going to spray it all out and hope to pour the majority of it out with the oil, and then take the brake clean and flush it one more time. So that's the goal. I got welds on all sides, like I said initially. So each gear has more than one weld on it. So with that being said, this thing ought to be locked up pretty tight. I mean, I know as of right now it is anyways, because I can, obviously, it's all rotating in one assembly now, so that's a plus. So I'm pretty sure what I wanted to get accomplished, I did get accomplished. And another reason for adding the brake clean like this anyhow, initially, is to help get that remaining oil and water out of here. I mean, every single keyway, everything about this transmission is just chewed up. Well, not chewed up, greased up. It's got surface rust. There's a lot of water in here at some point. And as you can tell, I'm even spraying the walls of the case. So that way, if there's still any slag in it, I'm getting it washed down into the bottom of the case in with that oil. So all in all, we should be in decent shape now. Hopefully. And I am still going to take the wire brush attachment on the drill and reach up into these crevices and run the brush to make sure if there's still any loose slag or slag that's just barely hanging on, we can get it knocked off and out of the transaxle. So, I know this is going to be the last of what I get done for today, so I'll see y'all back bright and early in the morning, and we'll get this thing finished up. Alright, what I'm going to do now is we're going to take the wire wheel and try to get this old gasket off. I'm assuming this thing is factory because it is on there. So, as you can see, I've did a little spot up in that top corner right there. And, I mean, I'm having to work for it, so I just figured I would tell y'all how I'm doing it. We're going to get it cleaned up the best we can. We're going to get all that old stuff washed out. Then we're going to make a new seal with gasket maker, get more gear oil poured into the bottom half. Then we're going to close the case. So, I'm going to get at it. I'm also wearing a respirator for this because this thing is dated. It's a 73. So, who knows what is in that gasket material, considering it is from 1973, more than likely. So as you can see, we got around the rim, then we went on the exterior of the rim as well, because once I get this thing shut back up and got the gasket made and everything and it's fully sealed, we're going to take and I'm going to pressure wash it because I'm going to paint it. And that's just because I'm going to paint it while we're at it. And then the shaft right there that I wire brushed as well, it just had a lot of rust. It's where the hub mounts. So I cleaned up all the residual rust there, so when I slide that case back on, there's less of a chance of putting any gouges in the shims. Last thing we want is to be leaking gear oil back out of this thing. So I guess the next thing that there is to do really is to get it poured out. And then I'm going to take some, I guess, coarse grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to scuff where I just took that wire wheel. Because if those of you that don't know, wire wheels will for the most part polish material. So I'm just going to scuff it, not like badly. I'm just going to take and run around it probably 2 times and just put some soft scratches in it. So that way the gasket maker has a good surface to adhere to. And we're going to do that on both sides. And other than that, I'll bring y'all back once I'm getting ready to shut it or get the gasket set up on it. And I guess we'll go from there. But before I do that, I forgot to mention, I've still got to clean the seam up on that other half of the case. And since that half of the case isn't full of gears, we're going to go ahead and I'm probably going to wire wheel the whole thing. Or probably not, just wire wheel the real bad areas. Other than that, just do the pressure washing and spray paint it. Alright, so I've taken it apart. I used a can of brake clean to make sure I got all the slag out. Visually, there's none left, so I took the other half of a can after that. And I just went ahead and sprayed everywhere else inside of this case so I could make sure that if there was any that was still there that I wasn't seeing, that obviously I got some on it. And what I'm putting in this is 80-90. I just wanted a thick gear oil because obviously what came out of it was thick. So now, where I covered the entire case with brake clean, before I start putting these gears back in, I'm just pouring this gear oil in, letting it get into them roller bearings and push out some of the air that may have gotten into them. So I'm just doing that for safety because the last thing I want is I reassemble it, get it all together, and those bearings don't have oil and I burn them up. So that's why I done that. But other than that, I'm going to speed y'all back up and I'm going to get back into assembling this thing and then I'll bring you back. Okay. Huh? Yeah. Whoa! You got straight up. Yeah, pretty cool. Check that out. All right, so as you can see, we got it reassembled. My bad, dropped the camera. As you can see, got it reassembled here. Everything's working the way it should. I've got it in neutral now. I've went through all 4 gears, which I guess technically there's 8 in this because it has a high and low range, but it is all working. So we're going to go ahead and fill this half of the case up with oil. Then we're going to go ahead and prep the surface with the gasket maker to get the gasket on it. So I'll get y'all back when we're getting ready to get that surface prepped and get the gasket put on it and get this case closed up for the last time. Alright, so as you can see, got it all lubed up, and I've got gasket maker on each half, or each side of this transaxle, I guess is what you want to call it. And I put it relatively thick layers on each side because that factory gasket, I'm sure, had something to do with the clearancing involved with this, like all the machine shims and whatnot. So I put a relatively thick layer on each side. There is going to be squeeze out or whatever, but what I'm going to do now is let this sit for 5 to 10 minutes because it's a relatively cool day here. And after 5-10 minutes, I'm going to piece these two halves together and start bolting them down. But prior to that, what I'm going to do right after this little video segment is I'm going to set these halves together without putting the bolts in them. So that way, as this gasket maker starts to set up, at least they're both going to be put together. So that way they can set up as one solid gasket rather than 2 separate. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'll bring y'all back when I've given it some time to start to cure. And then we'll start torquing all these bolts back down, get this thing closed up, and top it off the rest of the way on fluid. Alright, so it's been a couple days since we done the rear end on this. I've actually used it since. It worked out great. The only issue I'm having is I had to put the smaller back tires back on because the other ones are about 10 inches wide, or they're 1050s. So steering was impossible. And then I rigged up this little brush guard off of a tiller I had that blew up onto the front here just to give me some counterweight so I can steer. But all in all, posi tracking this little thing worked out well. And anyways, thanks for watching. See y'all on the next one.